Good morning. It is such a pleasure to share this Sunday morning with you. I am Kat Garland, and I use she, her pronouns. Thank you to everyone who had such a beautiful welcome for me this morning. You knew I was a little bit nervous to speak here for the first time, and you made me feel so comfortable. So many of you know me as DRE Zach's wife, or Time for All Ages and Puppet Ministry helper, or that physicist on Zach's Thursday night open Zoom. I bring all of those aspects of myself to you today, as you heard from Kevin, the coyote. But even more, today, I bring you myself, who is passionate about and called to children's education. This September will mark the beginning of my 22nd year teaching science, mostly in public schools, in a mixture of rural and urban locations, including 8 years in New York City. But let me begin with a story. The first middle school I taught at in New York City was in South Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I worked there part-time and taught 3 sections of 5th grade science, back to back to back. Each section had 28 children, all of whom were Black or Latino and from low-income families. Almost all were 2 or 3 grade levels behind in reading. Many had fathers, grandfathers, brothers, and uncles who were incarcerated. All lived in segregated neighborhoods, and the only white people they interacted with on a regular basis were their teachers. Many had never been to Manhattan or upstate. And you know what we did? We learned science. We did science. We learned how to read science texts and engineer zip lines, build balloon rockets and spaghetti bridges. We built models of the cell and designed experiments about plants. Students had to do experiments on small cafeteria trays at their desks, 5 columns of desks, 6 students deep. But we explored, we sang science songs, we learned science chants, and in fact, began and ended each class by chanting, "We are scientists." And you know what? One of those tiny 5th graders in an overcrowded, too hot classroom is now a high school physics teacher. Another is in graduate school studying climate science at Boston College. A third earned a philosophy degree at NYU and is now considering law school. A fourth is pursuing a master's degree in social work, and I could go on and on about those 84 children. And none of those children would have had the chance if their lottery numbers hadn't gotten pulled and they were able to enroll in a middle school committed to preparing them for college and beyond. Most low-income Black and Latino children in New York City do not have this experience. I teach for many reasons, but at the heart of it, I teach because I believe every child deserves an excellent education. Every child, not most of them, not the fortunate ones, but each and every one. The beautiful song we heard just a few minutes ago reminds us of the power schools have in shaping and affirming and growing a child's potential. Poet and educator Donovan Livingston gave voice to this in his now famous 2016 Harvard graduation speech, Lift Off. Livingston describes both the possibility and injustice present in our classrooms. I quote, "At the core, none of us were meant to be common. We were born to be comets, darting across space and time, leaving our mark as we crash into everything. A crater is a reminder that something amazing happened here, an indelible impact that shook up the world. Are we not astronomers looking for the next shooting star? I teach in hopes of turning content into rocket ships, tribulations into telescopes, so a child can see their potential from right where they stand. And injustice is telling them they are stars without acknowledging the night that surrounds them. Injustice is telling them education is the key while you continue to change the locks. Education, then, beyond all other devices of human origin, is the great equalizer of the conditions of men. And yet, I did not always feel qualified to speak on such a truth. I only realized recently that the classroom was never designed to fit me." End quote. Education can be the great equalizer when every student has access, feels that they belong, and learn that they too have boundless futures. But too often, children are met with teachers and learning opportunities that communicate that they don't belong, they aren't the ones who are capable, and that education just isn't for them. It was Horace Mann in the 19th century who first spoke of education as an equalizer and advocated for the common school so that every child could receive a basic education. Mann believed that public school was central to good citizenship, societal well-being, and participation in democracy. The idea of universal school then spread outward from Mann's Massachusetts. If you're thinking right now, wait, hasn't Zach been talking about all the transcendentalist ideas emerging from someplace in Massachusetts sometime in the 19th century? Why, yes. Who were Mann's literal neighbors in Concord, Massachusetts, but Emerson, Thoreau, and Alcott? As Zach and I were driving along Route 17 in New Jersey last week, on our way back from some time in Vermont, we pondered what would our transcendentalist lovers of nature make of what we have done to our landscape, scarred by highways and marked by shopping malls. Horrified and perplexed was our conclusion, and I think the same would apply to Mann if he saw the condition of public education today, for example, in New York City. 70 years after Brown versus Board of Education, our city remains divided by race and class. Segregation in housing continues to lead to segregation in schools. The commitment to integration in schools now seems like a wispy dream, long abandoned, with current practices harking back to the Plessy versus Ferguson separate but equal ruling in 1896. And yet the equal part of separate but equal has yet to be realized. Today, approximately 3/4 of Black and Latino students in New York City attend schools that are less than 10% white. In contrast, only 43% of Asian students and 11% of white students attend such schools. Opportunities are far fewer at schools that primarily serve Black and Latino students. For example, high school physics and computer science classes are rare. Math courses beyond Algebra 1 are rare. Air conditioning is rare. Experienced teachers are rare. Guidance counselors are rare. Advanced placement courses are rare. And by rare, I mean they may be completely non-existent. For example, 50% of public high schools in New York City do not offer a single physics course. Not a conceptual physics course, not an honors physics course, and certainly not an AP physics course. No physics course at all in half the public high schools in New York City. The single greatest predictor of successfully completing a college pre-med major is successfully completing a college physics course. And the single greatest predictor of passing physics in college is taking physics in high school. Do you see the line that I've drawn? Can you see the string of consequences that can flow from attending a low-quality high school? And in New York City, that most likely means a high school that serves predominantly Black and Latino students. You can be a straight A student at such a school and take the hardest possible classes that are offered. You could be valedictorian, and you would still be woefully unprepared to pursue a STEM major or a pre-med major in college without even knowing how unprepared you are. But you may be thinking, students have free choice in New York City. They are not forced to attend their neighborhood school. Students here can attend any school in the 5 boroughs. That is true, if they can get there, if they don't have childcare responsibilities after school, so they can spend 1 to 2 hours commuting a day, if they're able to pass the standardized tests many schools require, if they have been able to have a good middle school attendance record, if they're able to navigate the high school application process on their own. Much hinges on attending a high-quality middle school, and that hinges on which elementary school you attend. For too many children, the opportunities end before they even begin. Earlier, you heard an anecdote that Tema read from Jonathan Kozel's classic, Savage Inequalities. Then he was speaking about his experience as a teacher in Boston in the 1960s. Here, he digs into how educational inequities persisted in the late 1970s and using Maryland as an example. Quote, "Most academic studies of school finance, sooner or later, ask us to consider the same question. How can we achieve both equity and excellence in education? Equity seems to be valued as a desired goal, but when the recommendations of such studies are examined, and when we look as well at the solutions that innumerable commissions have proposed, we realize that they do not quite mean equity and that they have seldom asked for equity. What they mean, what they prescribe, is something that resembles equity but never reaches it, something close enough to equity to silence criticism by approximating justice, but far enough from equity to guarantee the benefits enjoyed by privilege. The differences are justified by telling us that equity must always be approximate and cannot possibly be perfect, but the imperfection falls in almost every case to the advantage of the privileged. In Maryland, for instance, one of several states in which the courts have looked at fiscal inequalities between school districts, an equity suit filed in 1978, although unsuccessful, led the state to re-examine the school funding system. When a task force set up by the governor offered its suggestions 5 years later, it argued that 100% equality was too expensive. The goal, it said, was 75% equality, meaning that the poorest districts should be granted no less than 3/4 of the funds at the disposal of the average district. But as the missing 25% translates into differences of input, teacher pay, provision of books, class size, etc., we discover it is just enough to demarcate the difference between services appropriate to different social classes and to formalize that difference in their destinies. The equalized 75%, says an educator in one of the state's low-income districts, buys just enough to keep all ships afloat. The unequal 25% assures that the ships will sail in opposite directions. It is a matter of national pride that every child's ship be kept afloat. But children in one set of schools are educated to be governors. Children in the other set of schools are trained for being governed." End quote. Although this was written 4 decades ago, little has changed in our nation, especially in our largest urban school districts such as New York City. While laws are passed that provide funding formulas to ensure that each school receives the same amount of funding per child, these budgets are never fully funded. Higher income districts may make up the difference via fundraising, family donations, etc. Lower income districts are much less equipped to do so. The low-income schools I taught at in South Williamsburg and Crown Heights are anomalies. They are public charter schools that receive additional funding from nonprofits such as the Gates Foundation and the Robin Hood Foundation. Public charter schools exist in limited numbers, are permitted and funded at the whim of political administrations, and are often not supported by large swaths of voters. But they provide an excellent, joyful, and rigorous college prep education to students who might otherwise be left behind. I ask us to think about, what does it say about us as a society, as individuals, when a child's access to quality education still depends more on their address or the chance that their lottery number is drawn than their potential? Unitarian Universalism holds as its first principle the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Not some people, not just the children of privilege, every person. If we truly believe that, then the injustice of our educational system should start to feel like a crisis. So, if we know there is a gap, a need in our city for improvements in education, how can we work to close it? We can advocate for fair funding that is actually funded for all schools. Funding decisions are made at the local, state, and federal levels, starting with community education councils and a school's chancellor appointed by the mayor. The federal government controls key purse strings for funding low-income schools and accommodations for students with different abilities. We can volunteer, especially at schools where most parents of students do not have the ability to take time off work to volunteer. We can donate to schools, especially those that do not already have their budget supplemented by an active PTA with the ability to fundraise from the community. We can be aware, and my hope is that we will be vocal, that schools are still separate and still unequal, and that while there are many causes, the roots lie in the segregated housing patterns and ways in which education is funded. In last week's Open Circle Adult RE class, you knew I couldn't leave without one more shout out to Zach. We studied a scripture from the Old Testament, chapter 6, verse 8 in the book of Micah. Micah, a prophet, explains that what is asked of us in our lives is only to act justly and to show mercy and to walk humbly. Let us not simply hope for a better world. Let us act justly and show mercy. Let us light a path, not just for our own children, but for all children. Let us carry forward our UU values into the schools in our city. Let us help all children truly have the opportunity to lift off. Thank you.